Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CXO Show. This is the first episode of a show that I've been meaning and wanting to do for an extremely long time. When I was talking to the first guest of this particular show, she asked me a little about the show. And I hadn't really thought it through till that point as to why were we really trying to do this. But that got me to think. And the reason of doing this show is that I'm a huge consumer of podcasts, of business shows, of all things business. And I love consuming that, right? And every time I would watch one of these shows, I would see entrepreneurs being featured in it, sports people being featured in it, sometimes philosophers being featured in it. But I rarely show that featured some of India's and the world's best professionals, right? And the professionals are the people that are doing 99% of the work when it comes to most companies. So I thought of creating a platform where we would get some of India's and the world's top professionals to share their secrets about what they do well, what makes them tick, and what is it that they aspire to do for the company and country that they belong to. So with that, we have our first guest, and picking our first guest for this particular show was a tough task. Right? And it had to tick off a few boxes for us to select that first guest. The first box that had to be ticked off was, of course, the box of somebody who's in the HR space, because we, of course, are a higher education company, and we wanted somebody who would be from that HR space to throw a little bit of insight there, right? The second, I think, box it had to tick off was it had to be a company that was one of India's most respected companies, and a company that was really omnipresent, which is literally present in each and every house, right? So we wanted an organization like that. And when I spoke to my guest, I realized we were also looking for a company that is very serious about people development and talent development as a topic, right? And the three boxes got ticked, and therefore we have Anuradha with us, right? Anuradha, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for making the time. I know you have a crazy schedule, and you've made the time for this particular show. I'm going to read out an introduction, and the reason why I'm going to do it because you have an extremely illustrious career, and if I just did it off the top of my head, it wouldn't do justice to your illustrious career. So bear me reading from a paper, and then we'll get started, right? Anuradha Razdan is the Executive Director, HR for HUL, and the CHRO of South Asia, okay. Anuradha is a business-focused HR leader with an international career. She currently serves as a member of the Management Committee of HUL as Executive Director HR and Chief Human Resource Officer, Unilever South Asia. She's also a member of Unilever Global HR Leadership Team. Anuradha joined HUL as a management trainee in 1999 and spent the first 14 years of her career building diverse experiences in India, after which she was sent to Unilever's headquarters in London for 6 years. Is that right?
That's right, 6 years.
In her current role as CHRO, Anuradha is driving an ambitious and future-focused people agenda to build talent and capability for Unilever South Asia to win in the next decade. She's passionate about leadership development and is a strong voice advocating for more inclusive businesses and communities. Anuradha, I was going through the list of recognitions, and they're just amazing, right? Anuradha is recognized as one of India's most powerful women in business by Business Today in 2020, awarded CHRO of the Year in HR Excellence in 2021, awarded Distinguished Alumni from XLRI in 2022, recognized as ET HR Leaders of India to 2023, and a host of other kind of achievements that you are. You co-chair, of course, the FICCI Human Resource Committee, and you were telling me about the G20 Empower working group that you're working on. How do you find the time to do all these things?
Like they say, if you have the will, you find the time.
Okay.
And I just believe that I focus on what I'm doing just then and blank out everything else, and time happens.
Okay, so actually when we were doing our pre-interview chat, I think the first thing that struck me, because this is a question that I get so often, people hopping from one company to the other versus somebody that joined as a management trainee and made it all the way to the top, right? Because a lot of people think that the way to get some kind of professional success is by doing a lot of hopping, and you did the bang opposite of that, and you've had a stellar career. So tell us to start with a little bit about your background and then a little bit about your journey at HUL.
So I'll start with what you asked me. Why am I still here?
Yeah.
And it goes back to the feeling I had when HUL made me an offer on campus, an offer that I wasn't expecting, because HUL was seen as this aspirational dream employer. And I certainly didn't see myself landing a job here. And that feeling is what I call the joy of making it.
Yeah.
And 24 years later, I still feel that joy of making it. I still get out of bed wanting to go to work. Our campus in Andheri is a fabulous place.
Yeah.
And what keeps that joy alive? I think it's the continuous learning, the stretch, the opportunities, the people I get to engage with.
Yeah.
And that's what's kept me going. Did I always know that I wanted to do HR? No, but what I figured out quite early for myself was that I have a special connection when I engage with people, and I wanted to work with people. And when I started studying economics, I was always fascinated by business. And when that came together, HR seemed right, and I've never had a moment to regret it. Some of my experiences, I started as a management trainee, 15 months of that across the business, where you're literally paid to learn.
Okay.
And I think that's the first thing that makes HUL stand out. We've run this program for 90 years. I don't think a trainee has ever been pulled out because we had a vacancy.
Yeah.
And so that learning investment that gives you a full breadth of exposure to the organization.
Yeah.
Then the first 10 years of my time in HUL were really about, learning the ropes of the business, always in HR, but partnering sales, marketing, supply chain. So really understanding the business, and that also shaped my philosophy of the kind of HR person I wanted to be when I grew up. And that was business connected HR person is a relevant and an effective HR person. If you don't know, if you don't take joy in the execution and rigor of operations, you can do all the strategic things in the world, but you've got to be able to balance both. One of my crucible jobs was when I was head of talent and leadership development for HUL, because it meant that I could take further what this company is famous for, and I could leave. I could touch the future. I could leave my mark. The next phase of my career was learning to swim in another pond. I was expatriated to the United Kingdom, where I worked in our London headquarters for 6 years. And that was a different set of experiences. It was about roles that gave me, a more strategic perspective, a global perspective, learning to work with leaders and teams across different countries, appreciating different cultures, and just, being a strategic HR partner of a global business, thinking about talent capabilities in a slightly longer horizon. I always put my hand up to do more. So I built deep M&A experience in the UK and US. At one point, I was leading the talent attraction agenda for Unilever. And then the last phase, or where I sit today, was the homecoming, or really my dream job, living my dream, which is my current role, which is a fabulous canvas for everything that I trained for, aspired to do. I came to this job in 2019. And I have had my fair share of challenges and uncertainty, whether it was COVID or whether it's been the, the more recent political and economic uncertainty that we see around us. But it's also been a lot of fun. I led the people integration of the GSK and HUL merger, the largest FMCG merger, providing care for our people and communities through COVID. And now, of course, building our talent and leadership agenda for the next level. So never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. Okay, I know the next question is a tough one. It's like picking a favorite child of sort, right? But of all the different things that you do in HR, I have the two questions in it. What is your most favorite thing when you're doing, you don't realize that time has passed by? And what is the most important thing in your opinion, right? Or are they the same?
Actually, in my case, they are somewhat the same.
Okay.
I'll start with my leadership purpose.
Okay.
And one of the beautiful things about Unilever is that we help every individual employee discover their purpose.
Got it.
And my purpose is actually very close to my job, which is to help spark magic between people, their passion, and the opportunities they get.
Yeah.
Where my biggest joy sits is really in leadership development, in taking our talent to the next level, thinking about what's the best talent for the biggest priorities of our business. How do we get the best out of people? How do we create those distinctive capabilities? And when I do that, I don't keep track of time. The other thing which actually gives me a lot of joy is my one-on-one connects with people.
Yeah.
And anytime I'm feeling frustrated or I'm feeling like, I need something to open my mind, I literally walk away from my desk, walk anywhere in our campus, and there'll be someone who wants to have a conversation with the CHRO. And that feeling that, when I touch individuals, I can help them think of where they are a little differently or support them in their development gives me a lot of joy.
You've been in HR for a very long time, right? As a domain, through this entire 24 years, barring the first when you were a management trainee?
Always in HR.
Always in HR, right? So how have you seen the HR landscape evolving over these 20 odd years, right? I wanted to think a little bit about how it was probably 20 years back and what you see right now. Has it evolved a lot, or are we making a bigger deal about it than
No, it has absolutely evolved. Look, even 24 years ago, when I joined Unilever, we were one of the most progressive companies when it came to HR or people development, and everybody else was significantly behind. But at that time, if you were an effective HR function, you would be doing a good job of partnering the business on things that were, more traditional about, talent, training, and of course, becoming more efficient in the systems, processes, learning. But there was always this conversation around, are you an employee champion, or are you a strategic partner, or, are you sort of a steward of the processes? Today, there is no question that HR is the nerve center of the organization. I feel it, and I think every business that wants to be successful and future fit knows it and feels it, and that's why you feel such a shortage of really high quality HR skills today. Why is HR the nerve center? Because the times that we live in are hugely uncertain, hugely volatile. Just look at the last 3 years that and the kind of events that we've seen. It requires organizations to be agile. For organizations to be agile, people and leaders need to be agile, and that means that we have to wire this into the DNA. People need to be able to pivot plans and be resilient to do this. So I think the first thing is about hardwiring this agility so that we have the ability to pivot fast and yet be effective. The second thing is about distinctive capabilities of the organization. In our case, as an FMCG, it is about de-averaging our consumers, or it is about understanding channels of the future. It is understanding new ways of marketing or market development, or what sustainability means to our consumers and to our planet. And these are not just capabilities that you build in individuals, but they have got to be hardwired into the organization, into processes, systems, the way the organization runs, the way interdependencies work. That requires HR. And then, of course, there is the part of, skilling individuals to make them future fit, to make sure that we have the right talent and the right high performance culture. So I really see HR as one of the most critical not even a partner, but a player in the success of an organization.
Do you see a huge shift in the expectations that young professionals have today versus, say, 10 years back? Are you seeing that distinctive shift?
You mean from an organization?
Yes. When you're looking at your new talent,
yes.
right? Are you seeing a different type of new talent, or are people like people have always been, right? Are you seeing a
Totally.
Okay.
And you know, one of the big events
Yeah.
of our times
Yeah.
was the pandemic.
Okay.
And we knew that the talent and the people who went home to work remotely
Yeah.
in 2020
Yeah.
were not going to be the people who came back.
Okay.
And that just added to some of the other trends and other shifts that were already starting to take place
Yeah.
around us. One of the things we did was we actually commissioned a piece of work with our market research company, internal market research function and HR teams in HUL to say, what does the employee of the future look like? And there were 5 or 6 big things we saw. The first being that, you know, what we call you only live once, which someone really described to me that, you know, in the West, the pandemic taught people a better balance of work and life. But in India, people discovered the meaning of life itself. And this was a live quote because we had never seen such large-scale devastation. And therefore, people said, my job is not everything. There is more to my life than work. And therefore, the whole relationship with the workplace, with the organization, and themselves changed. The second thing is, my job is not just about vertical progression. I want to live my purpose. I want to make an impact to my community. I want to be able to pursue my hobbies. I want a side hustle. And then the third thing which I really saw was, you know, this brand me. People want to create some, you know, that only what I create is my own, a unique way of self-expression. If I have to summarize it, I would just say that talent today wants agency or control much more than before in their careers, in how organizations view them, and that's very different from before.
That's so interesting. So what do you as HR head and as Unilever, what are you doing to deal with these 3 things that you spoke about?
So look, the first of all, it's about knowing what's on the minds of people. It doesn't mean that you respond to every trend, but we have identified 2 or 3 which are really big. So the first is, you know, the need to develop the whole you. And therefore, our learning and development today is not just about functional or leadership, but there is a whole discover your purpose, create a future fit plan. Every individual has an individual future fit plan. And that's not just about how I'm going to be successful in this role, but what is my leadership purpose and what do I want to be future fit for life. The third is the aspect of well-being, holistic well-being, mental, physical, financial, purposeful well-being. So we are really helping the individual live their whole self fully. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would touch upon is flexibility. Because people have different aspirations. There are many who still want to work full time and, you know, want the acceleration, the progression, pretty much like the traditional template that we've grown up in. But equally, there are people who want flexibility. And our job is to support and make those options available. So we have 2 experiments that we've run now for nearly 3 years. The first is called You Work, and it basically allows our existing employees to dial up or dial down how much they want to work.
That's so interesting.
So, you know, you could want to work for 6 weeks, you could want to work for 6 months. And your reasons may be different. And typically one would have expected young mothers or returning mothers from maternity. But there are people who want to do this because they want to travel. There are people who want to do this because they have a side hustle. But why they do this is because it gives them that flexibility and still the security. So that's You Work. There is another model that we have, which is open to you, which is gig work the HUL way.
Got it.
And we realized that during the pandemic, there were so many people who wanted to build new skills and experiences and wanted to do it differently.
Yeah.
So it started then, but it's a fantastic platform for us to build and bring in people with niche skills, give them that flexibility. So flexibility is the second trend that we are. And the third one is that today the workforce has 4 or 5 generations of people, because you know the change in a generation at work is happening much faster than before, and therefore to build leaders who are compassionate and inclusive, which means open to different styles, that different people, that the people I lead will want different things from me, and so these are the 3 things that we are working on.
That's so interesting, because typically when you have one of India's largest companies actually being so innovative when it comes to HR and showing the flexibility and adapting to times, that's amazing, right? So every HR leader across the board is asked the all-important question about work from home, right? Because there's so much debate happening on both sides of the aisle on this particular question. So I want you to weigh in on your view as an HR leader, and possibly the Unilever point of view on work from home.
Look, I would say that flexibility is here to stay.
Okay.
It's good for organizations and it's good for people. It allows us to strike the right balance of when we need to be together to collaborate in moments that matter, and those must be face to face. Equally, there are times when it's good for people to focus, do deep work, or for them to exercise that choice of when they want to be remote or agile, and therefore flexibility is here to stay. We have a very clear hybrid ways of working, where 3 days a week we invite our people to offices or the market. Our sales teams and factories, of course, work all days in the field or in the market or in factories. And the other 2 days, our office-based employees can decide whether they want to work. And over time, we've seen teams fall into a rhythm of their own. Of course, there are days when there is higher presence, there are days when there is a lower presence, but teams have fallen into a rhythm, and it's now not something that we need to track or chase, because it's sort of evolving organically.
Got it.
But there is no doubt that there is a big case for presence and collaboration. In an organization like ours, innovation is our lifeblood, and innovation happens from presence, collaboration, those conversations, and those moments that matter. I mean, you can't have a conversation that really focuses on an individual's development or a meaningful career conversation. There's no replacing that face-to-face touch, and those moments that matter must happen face-to-face.
There's this very interesting term called tribe knowledge. Right? I really like that term called tribe knowledge, and a lot of that often happens when people are together in one space. Otherwise, that tribe knowledge somewhere is lost.
Absolutely, it's a great term. I hadn't heard it. And you know, serendipity. You can't say that, oh, I'll just make a Teams call, or it is harder. But when you just bump into someone or see some team doing something else, absolutely.
Even from a relationship building point of view, I think when COVID was on, one of the thoughts that I had was, hey, you know what, this works perfectly fine, right? Just doing VCs. But the minute it got over and I actually met my teammates again, I'm like, listen, there's no replacement to actually being in a physical space with somebody, just from a relationship building point of view, right? So you guys are trying to balance both bits, I think, extremely effectively. Tell me about, I want to dive a little deeper into the HR space, right? What are the 2 or 3 things that you think every young HR professional entering this space needs to have in terms of skills or behaviors, in your opinion, right?
So we're talking about HR professionals.
HR professionals, right? Just think of somebody that's a young HR professional, just finished probably his MBA in HR, getting into the profession. So what would be the 2 or 3 things that you look for in him that would make him a successful HR professional?
So the first thing I would say is you're a business professional. And very often we give ourselves the license in HR to believe that there are business leaders and there's us. But nobody in supply chain or sales or marketing ever thinks of themselves as anything except the business. And therefore, the first thing is that every HR professional has to start thinking of himself or herself as the business.
Tell me a little more about that. I love that point.
The first thing is that develop deep commercial knowledge and passion for the business that you are in, whichever sector, whichever industry. And if you don't fall in love with that business and that model, then that's not the place for you.
Correct.
But there is no replacing, understanding the business, the interdependencies. And the more you do that, the more effective you can be as you start creating solutions. So commercial knowledge, business knowledge is
what
happening.
happens otherwise?
Otherwise, then you are functioning in isolation and you are irrelevant.
Correct.
For me, I believe that HR is relevant if your agenda drives the business forward.
Correct.
And it's relevant when the business leaders partner with you and own the agenda.
Got it.
So that's the first thing, commercial knowledge and business appreciation. The second thing is, there's a term these days which is quite nice, which is think like a researcher. Frame the problem. And again, of course, there's no replacing that gut, that intuition, that qualitative. But we've got to balance that with a hypothesis, use data, use insights from many sources of people data, business data, set up systems that can drive connections and interlinkages so that, data orientation to create insights which then help you solve problems at the simplest level. Predictive attrition, for example, to know predictive analytics to predict attrition is an example. Or that I have a hypothesis that, there is greater engagement linked to greater presence. But how do you know? Can you look at the data? So I think that orientation of data. And then the third is to really think ecosystem, because gone are the days when we work in our silos. We've got to think of the larger ecosystem, whether it's the outer core or whether it's the country. Are you as an HR team standing up for issues? And to be able to create an impact to the ecosystem, you have to understand the ecosystem. So what's happening in the world around you? And then, of course, the traditional skills of talent and workforce planning and succession planning and employee relations. But all of this with a business lens.
I think that's amazing, right? Because I think more often than not, the HR leaders or HR professionals that are taken really seriously within an organization, that only happens when they have a commercial sense, when they truly understand the business. If that doesn't happen, it seems like an incomplete perspective which is there which they bring to the table. So I think that's
my team, my HR team and I, our ambition is to add 1% more growth to the business.
That's the way HR professionals need to be thinking. I think that's a great point. So HUL has been a nursery of producing some great leaders across the board, right? You guys have leaders that are both in HUL and across the business spectrum in India. So what makes the process of leadership development so special at HUL that creates all these high-performing leaders?
So look, the first thing is this DNA of leaders building leaders. And it cannot be created in a year or even by one generation of leaders. We are very blessed that over the last 6 or 7 decades, generation after generation of leaders have invested in building this leadership capital and legacy for the future. And that creates a certain mindset of ownership, pride, where leaders hold themselves accountable and the organization holds them accountable, not just for the business outcomes they create, but also the leadership impact, how many people they've grown and groomed. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's supported by a lot of very robust processes. The first is that, we take a lot of pride in being employer of choice across sectors, and we are unrelenting in our pursuit of hiring stunning talent, not good talent. I think bring in the best talent, and then the rest of the job becomes easier. So a lot of effort, leadership investment, HR investment in identifying that right talent, bringing them, and then grooming them. We have this management training program called the Unilever Future Leaders Program, again in its 6th decade. And this is this 15-month immersive program that I started by sharing my own experiences, where people get their functional rotations, but also move across functions. They work with communities. They have a rural stint. We have a future fit stint. Everybody, irrespective of their discipline, does a sales stint. And you know what's nice is that we are almost repetitively consistent about this. There are a few things which we change, but there are most things that don't change, and that's how we want it to be. The adherence, that like I said, we'll never pull out a trainee because we need to fill a vacancy. The beauty of this program is this, whole network of support that we create around the trainee, the coach, the tutor, the mentor. And then, the whole network of relationships that builds and grows. I think that's another very big cornerstone of our leadership development. Then, of course, it's also for our mid-career recruits. When they come in, a robust onboarding, buddies for them, a whole suite of leadership development programs which we call Leading the Unilever Way, and they support you at different points in your in your career journey. And then of course the focus on individual development. I think what also is very instrumental is the rotation that we give people, the movement across jobs every 2 or 3 years, and that is again underpinned by very strong talent discussions which are owned by leaders. People don't hoard talent. We want to give that depth and width of experiences in India, internationally. And when this all comes together, it makes for a great leadership factory.
Yeah, so I remember somebody telling me that used to work at Unilever, saying that the 15-month program that you have that gives people exposure across different departments, especially sales for people that come into non-sales role, is so important to bring in the commercial acumen that you were talking about in some way. And just a holistic understanding
and
of
the heartbeat of the organization, right? If you don't understand that, then
and that's a model that has been replicated by so many other companies because it works so effectively, taking that seriously. The other thing that I remember is somebody telling me, and I think you alluded towards that when leadership development becomes the mandate of the company and not just the HR department.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. Like I said, leaders take pride in this. And when you have been the beneficiary of something, you want to pass it on. And that's how it becomes hardwired into our culture.
Into the culture. Wow, that's so interesting. I want to move on to some advice giving, right? Because you've really gone up the ranks and done phenomenally well in your career. What advice or suggestions would you have for a young person across, it could be in joining any department of HUL? What advice would you have for them in terms of having a stellar career like yours? Give me 2 or 3 points that come to your brain.
So the first thing, I say is find your superpower. Be proud of it and use it. Because when I say superpower very consciously, because we are always a little bit embarrassed about our strengths and try to underplay them and spend so much more time thinking about where do I need to get better. But we are hired and we are strongest when we play to our strengths. So my first message is find your superpower, talk about it, and use it. That's the first thing.
What do you think your superpower was?
My superpower is, like I said, the ability to make a connection and create that special sort of engagement which allows us to find better solutions. My other superpower is knowing that my voice matters and speaking truth to power.
Oh,
So
nice.
I will always say what's on my mind, respectfully, but with a lot of authenticity. I recognize that and I use that. So I think that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is, make your own development a focus for yourself, because no one is going to make your development a focus for themselves. Of course, the organization will support you, your leaders and bosses will help you, but your development has to be your own focus, and give it the kind of importance you would give to your most important business deliverable. And what do I mean by that? Is think at every stage of your career, there is a next. So there was a time in my career when I needed to build global mindset. At that point, I put my hand up and was sent for 6 months for a secondment outside before I was expatriated. I had to put skin in the game. I had a 1.5-year-old baby. It wasn't easy leaving him behind. But or then at another stage, it was about, how do I communicate to large audiences for inspiration and impact? Today, it's something else. It's about how do I become a leader for the larger world beyond just my function and my company. So whatever it is for you at different stages, make that a priority. Put a plan around it. Create a circle of support. I've always had mentors and bosses who supported, but sometimes you need coaches or specific skills or programs that you need to do. And the third piece of advice I would give is always ask for feedback. And you realize this as you go higher in the organization. Very few people give you honest feedback. Most people tell you what you're good at, but to really find out where you don't do so well, you have to amp up the number of listening posts you create for yourself. So ask for that feedback. I do an open 360 where I send to my whole HR team in South Asia every June feedback, and then I make it transparent to all of them to see. So that's what I would say, other than, of course, to focus on life skills today, whether it is digital and data dexterity, but really more than anything, this mindset of learning and curiosity.
Very interesting. So, I think the couple of thoughts that really changed my life. One of the thoughts was this thought from Jim Rohn, where he says, work harder on yourself than you will work on your job. If you work hard on your job, you may make a living, but if you work hard on yourself, you'll make a fortune.
Sure.
Right? So that thought really was a turning point in my life, because I realized the importance of self-development and how it helps both you and your job if you do that. I was smiling when you shared feedback, because Hillary Clinton has this quote where she says, take feedback seriously, not personally, right? And I think most leaders and individuals are busy taking feedback personally and not seriously, right? And I think from just a self-development point of view, prioritizing your self-development and ensuring that you get robust feedback from people is so important.
And eventually you know yourself the best. So you don't have to act on every piece of feedback, but take it, process it, file it away somewhere, and if it makes sense, act on it.
Be open-minded enough for you to be able to do that. That's so interesting. What skills do you think are all important for people today, right? In a changing world, if you had to pinpoint a couple of skills that you think, hey, department agnostic, industry agnostic, what are the things everybody needs to have to make them effective?
Look, I won't talk about data and digital fluency, because you guys do that better than anybody else. But I will talk about the mindset of learning, unlearning and relearning, because we all know that jobs will become irrelevant, the half-life of skills we talk about. So the more you are open to learning, unlearning and relearning, which means different experiences, different contexts, I think that's really super important. And the second one is inclusion, because today for our communities to progress, for businesses to progress, we have to make sure that everybody has an equal starting point, and it means being open to different points of view, and through that you get in ideas, and that's also a kind of being open to learning.
Got it.
So that's what I would call up.
That's what, okay. Last couple of questions, right? there are different stats on women as leaders within companies and just women professionals in India. As a matter of fact, there was a scary stat that said that there's a decline in the women workforce in India. What suggestions or again advice would you have for young women professionals just entering the workforce for them to have great careers?
Look, I would, some of it is similar to what I spoke of, which is in terms of, play to your strengths.
Anything unique?
Anything unique, I will talk about one thing which I think specifically has helped me, and that is building capacity and resilience.
Got it.
Because it is true that there are moments in your life when women are challenged and stretched more than our male counterparts. But to not self-select out, to really build that circle of support for yourself. And in the toughest moments, not opting out. I think that's one piece of advice. And don't make those decisions on your own. Speak to people who you trust. Sometimes people who you're not even comfortable with, because they may push you to take better calls. The second thing I would say is that women are they spend too much time apologizing for what they are not, and we need to build a greater confidence, and that's as much as the woman as the organization. So be part of a support network that will help you feel more resourceful and confident. Those are the things that I would say.
Those are the things you would say. Okay. So, Anuradha, what are the skills that you think are required by young professionals entering any department within your company or just across the board, right? What do you think are those skills which are critical? 2 or 3 things that you see.
So, we know the ones that have been called out as priority skills by the World Economic Forum. And it's not very different to what we heard, but really data and digital dexterity, creative problem solving, critical thinking, communication. And I would really say, openness to learning, not a skill, but really the most important skill.
The most important thing, right? So, what's interesting is that so much has changed in our world, but so many things have remained constant, right? So when you go back to stuff like communication skills or interpersonal skills or problem solving for that matter, these are age-old skills required across the board. So what advice or suggestions would you have for women in the workforce in order for them to have extremely successful careers like you have? And I know you've given a few suggestions across the board, but anything specific when it comes to women in the workforce?
So first of all, the suggestions that I spoke of that helped me in my leadership journey are the same for men and women. Specifically for women, I would call out a few. The first and most important is what I call capacity and resilience. Because women tend to self-select themselves out. There is no doubt that there are moments in your career, in your life, which will challenge a woman far more. But at that point, being able to make the right choices, building the right support system, and finding that balance in whatever way works best, but to not give up and not to self-select out. It's never easy, not for anyone. So I think that's one thing. And the second thing I would say is lift as you climb, because women need to be advocates, mentors for other women. I've learned from the experiences of women role models who came before me, and that's special, right? Because their reality is closer to yours in many ways, and therefore be part of women networks, reach out to women role models, and for senior women to also play that role to help groom, mentor, and grow other women who they lead. This is what I would say.
Anuradha, thank you very, very much for doing this for us. We really appreciate you taking out the time, and you were so articulate in everything that you shared, and I'm sure it's going to be extremely helpful for the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
2 thoughts I'm going to leave you with. Remember what I said about your superpower. Find it, know it, use it. And the second thing, We live in a time when skills are the most valuable currency. So focus on the skills you want to build, focus on the skills that will make you relevant and future fit.
So this is a great interaction. I love talking to people like Anuradha because they're so insightful. For me, I think one of the biggest takeaways and a reminder of sort was the importance of an HR professional wearing the commercial hat and really understanding the business, because that's when an HR professional can become really effective. I think that was one of the key takeaways. I think the other takeaway was just understanding how HUL over the years, because it's so well known for that, to build this nursery of leaders for corporate India, and how they managed to do that consistently over 5 decades or so. I think that was interesting to hear. And I think, of course, the last thing that both of us, I think, feel very passionate about is self-development and the importance of it, and to make it a priority at all points of time. Because so often we get busy in the daily rut of our work and don't really make self-development a priority, whether it's on the professional side or the personal side, right? So for me, these were some amazing reminders and takeaways from this conversation.